Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland. Tonight I re-rank all 9 Led Zeppelin studio albums. Now, I know there's an argument for one of these albums to not be considered a studio album, not a true studio album, but we're going to put a little asterisk on that, and we're going to include Coda tonight. Now, why would I re-rank these albums? I just put out an archival video. It's my last video, folks. It'll be right next to this video on my homepage. And I ranked 8 of the albums we talked about tonight, and that asterisk fits in to my reasoning in that video. But you gotta understand, that video I did almost 2 years ago, folks, and all of that information, I still stand by. What I say about each and every album in that video, I still firmly believe in. But when I put out that video, I ranked those albums under these criteria. First of all, songs that were on the album. You know, an album with some of the strongest Led Zeppelin songs on it got a higher ranking. Then came musicianship and what they do on each piece on those albums. Then my final criteria was just my own personal preference. But now my criteria for tonight's ranking, folks, is going to be based on the album as a whole, the grandness that was achieved on each and every one of these wonderful masterpieces. I'm looking for gloss. I'm looking for a greatness. I'm looking for a statement, whether done on purpose by Led Zeppelin or just achieved organically. Now, don't forget, I still stand by my former list. But in tonight's video, we're gonna find out which are the greatest Led Zeppelin albums. Okay, so first of all, my number 9 position, which would have been number 9 in my last list as well, for obvious reasons, is the album Coda. Now, in the video that I covered Coda, I always mentioned that this was a good album. This was an album that any other band would have been more than happy with to put out to their listening public. And, of course, again, I ranked it a good album. In tonight's list, it's going up a notch. I'm going to consider this a great album. Now, what do I mean between good and great? Well, here's how I rank albums. They're either bad albums, they're fair albums, they're average albums, they're good albums, they're great albums, or they are masterpieces. Although Coda is number 9 in tonight's ranking, it also goes up a notch in my ears, especially when you look at the Coda Deluxe version. It is their anthology, folks, you know, and it is an essential listen to any true Led Zeppelin fan, and I'm grateful that damn album is out there. I consider it, under those terms, a great album, but number 9 on my list. Number 8 is the same album that was number 8 on my last list, and of course that was In Through the Outdoor. However, in tonight's rankings, it also goes up a notch. In my previous video on that album, I thought that this album was a great album. Not quite the masterpieces that the other 7 Led Zeppelin albums were, but a great album. I now consider it a masterpiece based on a whole lot of re-listening to that album in the last 2 years. But even with that promotion, it still sits at number 8. All right, so that leads to number 7, and this is the first change on the list. At number 7, and I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this because this is maybe Led Zeppelin's most important album, all right? And of course, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin III. Without this album, without what Led Zeppelin did, and again, this album is a masterpiece, all right? But what they did on this album was essential for their growth. But once again, tonight we're not talking about things like that. In my last list, Led Zeppelin III was much higher. But as an album, you know, the mixings on this, there's a tinniness to this album. Not horrible, but it is tinny compared to their other albums. And for that very reason, it's often my least listened to Led Zeppelin album, and yet it's got some of my favorite material. All right, so number 7, Led Zeppelin III. That leads us to the number 6 position. And in the number 6 position, oh, I hate to do it, but I have to put my most beloved Led Zeppelin album in this position. And of course, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin I. All right, now, I heard that even from this side of the camera, folks. Settle down. First of all, I love this album. Without this album, there would have been no Led Zeppelin. How this album was recorded, the shortness, it is a great achievement. But is it a great album? Well, of course it is. It's a great album. All of these albums on this list are great albums, but it is them at the very beginning. And you know what? Their production got better and better from this point. So I think it's fair to put Led Zeppelin I at number 6, or at least in tonight's rankings. That leads us to number 5, and for the very same reasons, I'm going to put Led Zeppelin II. Oh, but this is a much more sonically improved album, and there are even cuts on this album that lead or are actually the sound that they would achieve 2 albums later. And I know there's a certain element of Led Zeppelin fans that consider Led Zeppelin I, Led Zeppelin II as the essential albums. Everything's lesser from that point. They liked it hard, they liked it raw, they weren't interested in any changes or evolution in the band. That sound, album after album, is exactly what they want. And I can't blame people. I mean, they love their genre, right? But I'm wondering why a lot of those people who like Led Zeppelin I and Led Zeppelin II don't like Presence. Now, longtime viewers will know that I am a Presence fan. All right, I love this album. They achieve a grandness on this album, and for the most part get back to barbed wire Led Zeppelin. My only caveat on this album, and it's fine, but it sounds more like it belongs on In Through the Outdoor. And of course, I'm talking about Candy Store Rock. A great tune, by the way, but it doesn't belong on this album to my ears. But other than that one caveat, this has always been one of my favorite Led Zeppelin albums. All right, that leads us to the big 3. And for the first time in a bit on this list, the same album gets number 3 yet once again. Of course, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin's magnificent double album, Physical Graffiti. Now, as far as double albums in the entire history of rock, Physical Graffiti is my second favorite double album of all time, beating out George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. You go, hey, wait a minute. That's a triple album. Nah, not really. It's a double album with a bonus disc. And the only double album that Physical Graffiti lost to was the White Album. Again, one of my favorite albums in rock. So this is no disservice to this magnificent album. You know, the more I hear Kashmir over the years, the more I get out of it. And I just love that tune, but I also like the bits and pieces. I've always liked that in albums, top and tailing, you know, in long form. McCartney would top and tail on his albums and in the Beatle albums in short form, little snippets in between songs and all of that. This is done in like little songs in between magnificent songs, and it gives this album a breath, folks. It really does. Now, this is a very begrudging number 3. This has got to be the narrowest point between albums in this whole ranking. Number 3 and number 2 are so damn close. I could have changed them, folks, but I finally led to my former number 1 Led Zeppelin album of all time, Led Zeppelin IV, or as I like to call the damn thing, Zoso. Now, when I get to my number 1 pick, I'll explain why this album fell from number 1 to number 2. But it's certainly not because of the material. It's certainly not because of how the band sounds. It's certainly not because of how well this album sold. This album is like one of those albums like, Dark Side of the Moon or Thriller by Michael Jackson. I mean, every kid in the neighborhood had Led Zeppelin IV. And there's a reason for it. This is their most even-keeled album they've ever done. There is no lapse in between the material, no reason to apologize for a moment on this album. And by giving us that, many consider this their very greatest album. And once they achieved this kind of block of quality, they really had achieved their greatest accomplishment up to that moment. But then they put out Houses of the Holy. And yes, Houses of the Holy is my number 1 album on this list. I mean, talk about gloss. Even when the band goes acoustic, there is such a lushness to the songs. And when they go crazy, there is still that same lushness. The acoustic sounds on this album blend perfectly with the more rockier elements of this album. And this album, I've already said this many times, is Led Zeppelin's best album cover. And shame on anybody who says it's indecent. It was 2 kids, I think they were a brother and a sister, and they filmed them going up that causeway, and they just multiplied them. It's the same 2 kids on the album. But in this case, more than any other Led Zeppelin album, the album artwork directs you, even with the inner sleeve, all right? There's a whole story to this album. I've covered that before.